Welcome to another edition of Around with Randall, your weekly podcast on making your nonprofit more effective for your community. And here is your host, the CEO and founder of Hallett Philanthropy, Randall Hallett.
It's a pleasure to have you joining me, Randall, on this edition of Around with Randall. Maybe a little bit of a shortened version, but an important one. This week we celebrate Mother's Day, one of my favorite holidays, which I'll talk about here at the very end. But I think it's also important in the context of the nonprofit sector, because there's some things that we should realize about the importance of mothers and the challenges that exist for a huge majority of our profession. So let's start with some basics of why we're getting here, other than it's early May. Number one is there should be a realization. I think most of us know this, but according to various sources, about 73% of all nonprofit employees are female, which obviously makes them more likely to be moms than the other 27%. In terms of organizations, when we look at it, most of the time, it is smaller organizations that actually have more, in healthcare, more females. So I did a quick survey when I looked at all of the clients I work with. I kind of ballparked it, but I am lucky enough to work with about 19 or 20 different, what I'll think of as entities. Some are systems with multiple places. Just to do a rough count of the people I deal with, major gift officers, internal leaders, and then chief development officers, about 85% are female. And in part also is that of the 19, what I would think of as chief development officers in one way, shape, or form that I have the privilege of working with currently, that doesn't include the past, 15 are female. We are, as a nonprofit industry, dominated by women. What is also interesting is that the history of females in philanthropy and nonprofit works goes back to the earliest parts of our country. In the early days of our country, most of the engagement that women had wasn't really in a formal role like it is today, but it was more based on the idea of volunteering, and it really aligned with what their personal beliefs were. And that goes back into the Revolutionary War and into the first part of into the 19th century, the 1800s. And women began to work in the nonprofit world, which was really just called charity at the time, in areas like social service, things that were defined by gender inequality, like women's suffrage, and it was considered women's work or the woman's world. All of this is embarrassingly bad considering where we are today with some of the best nonprofits being run by women. We moved into the 20th century and even in the last part of the 19th century, and you look at the just amazing growth of healthcare, let's take for an example, or even colleges across the central and western part of the United States, those were done by many places, sisters. I think about the Sisters of Charity of Leavenworth and the Sisters of Mercy, building all of these charities, now nonprofits, were more formalized, but done by women. Colleges, College of St. Mary here in Omaha. There's others across the western part of the United States, founded by women. So there's a history with women being involved with philanthropy. So how does this all tie to Mother's Day? Well, I hear a lot about the balance challenge that comes from being a mom and working. And it sounds real to me. In a study done by Pew, 86% of moms who work feel rushed. And if they're working, and that 86%, it's constantly rushed, meaning they don't have enough time to get everything done. And that the 40% who work, or excuse me, 40% of moms who work constantly, consistently think they don't spend enough time with their kids. And even when there's two working parents, Pew also has found that 60% of the work in a home actually falls to the woman, to the wife, to the mom. Managing kids' activities, schoolwork, when somebody's sick, house, chores, all of it seems to fall more to the moms. And on Mother's Day, I think we should take a moment and realize something critically important. First of all, how important moms are, which we're going to talk about here in a second. But number two is there's academic research about the effects of moms working. And if most of our industry is female, and not all have kids, but let's say a majority do, and they have these feelings of being rushed and that they're not spending enough time and that they're doing most of the work at home anyway, we should also recognize there have been 69 different studies that have tracked, followed, measured, and reviewed the effects on children when the mom works. And all 69 have shown that there's no correlation between a working mom and the success of a child. And in fact, the child later in life has a better understanding of the world, according to most of these studies, when the mom works. Everybody's family and situation's a little bit different. And I work really hard at understanding that judging others is really detrimental to you and to them. What works in one family may not work in another. And juxtaposed, what works in that family may work for them, but not for you. We need to be more careful about not saying it's yes or no, but really what's best for you and your family and those kids, if you are a mother. I also want to spend just a second talking about why moms are important, not about philanthropy. There's medical studies that show that when a woman becomes pregnant, her life changes physiologically. I'm not talking about emotion. I'm talking about how the body changes. That a mom carries a child, some of the child's cells inside of her body for the remainder of her life. That when you have another human being inside you, there's an exchanging of the cells. Also, they've been able to track through functional magnetic imaging, resonance imaging, fMRIs, that the brain changes during pregnancy because of hormones. And it changes the idea of bonding and empathy and protectionism. That once you're a mom, those three things, the natural bonding you have with children as a mom, the empathy that goes with them, most importantly, the protectionism that comes with them, is off the charts. There's also a study done by Washington University in St. Louis that a child's brain, the hippocampus, changes with the more nurturing that occurs from a mother. And notice I don't say time and I don't say effect, but I'm saying the importance of a mom being involved with their child. So this hippocampus is the center point for a human being, so the child, for learning, memory, and response to stress. The more developed it is, the better off you do with it. Who helps develop that? Nurturing from the mom. I'm not here to say dads aren't important. I'm a dad. Love being a dad. I know I have an important role. But I think we need to balance the idea that a majority of our profession are women. And many of them are balancing being a mom and working at the same time. And that brings challenges, and their role is critically important with those kids. And that, yes, they can do both. They can be the CEO of a nonprofit and be a great mom at the same time. They are not mutually exclusive issues or results. There's 6 things I want you to know about why moms are important. The first is pretty basic. If you don't have mom, the world doesn't have you. At the end of the day, it may be as simple as that. But a couple others to think about. I mentioned the fact that moms become, as their brain changes with pregnancy and then into motherhood, with the idea of defending and protecting. If you think about watching, and my son does this, he loves animals, animal shows. Think about the bear with the cubs, or the shark with the baby sharks. I know there's an infant term for a shark, a pup, excuse me, I think it is. Or any other mom that we see in nature that we watch through Disney or National Geographic or whatever shows you pretend to into and watch as a part of this, they're highly protective. That's DNA. Moms are more protective just by their nature. Number 2 is that there's now studies that show, scientists are beginning to figure out that intelligence is actually inherited more from the mother than the father. And I can say with no scientific evidence or research by looking at my kids, boy, is that the truth. But science is telling us that mothers are the direct connection to that level of intelligence. We also know that the emotional backbone of kids and the ability to deal, we mentioned this a few moments ago, with this idea of stress and about the idea of dealing with life challenges actually comes from moms, more so than it does from dads. And that we learn forgiveness more often from moms than we do from dads. Mothers are more forgiving, and that learned behavior is directly connected scientifically to kids learning that behavior. And finally, moms are more likely to foster, promote, and support the dreams of kids more so than fathers. To consider what's possible, to think about the bigger picture. Science is telling us the value that moms play in some pretty interesting ways. But maybe most importantly, the most important thing that a mom gives is time. The Economist did a study and found that parents are beginning over the course of like history, when they've tracked this data, are spending more time with kids today than they ever have in the past. But what's interesting is that in almost every country that the economists looked at and all the research that went along with it, it's moms that spend the most amount of time over dads. Today, I say thank you to moms everywhere, particularly in an industry when I get on my Zoom calls or phone calls or I go on site, and literally 85% or more of the people I am privileged to work with are women, most of whom are moms. And the balancing act they have to do is remarkable. I'm lucky. I love what I do. And again, it's not better or worse. It's just how it works for us. My children's mother stays at home and makes sure we all are whole. I can't imagine all the work that goes into being an unbelievable professional and an unbelievable mom. So I tip my hat figuratively, or if you're on Zoom, figuratively or literally, to moms everywhere, particularly those working in the nonprofit space. And on a special note, I'd like to say Happy Mother's Day, and thanks to, first and foremost, my wife, who is a phenomenal mother to our 2 children, who really keeps us all going and is the reason my 2 kids are just outstanding. 90+% of the reason why is because of her. And finally, maybe in terms of connection, a thanks to my mom. I guarantee you she's not going to listen to this podcast. I don't think she knows I have a podcast. And if she did, I'm not sure she'd know how to turn on a podcast. But I can articulate in very clear knowledge and thought process that I would not be where I'm at in my life after 52 years had it not been for Mom. Period. I have an incredibly close relationship with my father. They've been married for 54 years. They were partners in bringing my sisters and myself up. But my sisters and I are who we are because of Mom. And so I say thank you, even though she'll never hear this. I say thank you to her. And I say thank you to all of you who are moms this special week, particularly those who also work. And maybe even more specifically, the privilege I have of working with you specifically, individually, if you're a mom as well. Don't forget, check out the blogs, 90-second reads at hallettphilanthropy.com. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, that's podcast@hallettphilanthropy.com. We live in a time where nonprofit work and philanthropy is really important. I hope you will embrace it and know that if you work in this profession, male or female, mom or not, you play a critical role for someone else in the community, which brings me to my all-time favorite saying. Some people make things happen. Some people watch things happen. Then there are those who wondered what happened. Life is full of a lot of people, a lot of things we really want in our communities. They're wondering what happened, organizations and people. And what we do is we make sense of it by helping. And we find people in the community, our donors, our volunteers, and others who are also people who want to make things happen for others. Thank you for being someone who makes things happen for those in those organizations and people who are wondering what happened. Know that you're doing unbelievable things each and every day. We'll jump back into a little more technical next time, right back here on Around with Randall. But glad we spent a minute talking about moms. Hang in there. We'll see you next time, right back here on Around with Randall. Don't forget, make it a great day.